I woke up in my boss's house, drugged and surrounded by people I once trusted, including my wife. That was the moment I realized, they weren't just cheating on me, they were planning to ruin me. You know, it's hard to imagine anything more devastating than having the woman you love betray you in the most intimate way possible. That thought kept circling through my mind as I sat alone in the dark tonight, trying to make sense of everything. Just hours ago, I honestly believed I had it all figured out. A solid job at a reputable firm, a comfortable home, and a wife I adored. The job and the house. Still there. But the love I thought I shared with Emily? That's where everything starts to fall apart. Emily and I had been married for nearly 5 years. I met her not long after she started working at my company, Whitman & Company, a financial consulting firm that supports small businesses with their accounting and planning. She joined the administrative support team initially, handling the kind of detailed paperwork and coordination that most people overlook but our company couldn't function without. From there, she worked her way up and eventually became the executive assistant to my boss, Nathan Whitman. And yes, Nathan's last name isn't a coincidence. His grandfather was the original founder of the firm, and it's been passed down through the family. Nathan's father, Charles, still runs the show as CEO, but he brought Nathan into the company about 7 months ago, setting him up in a pretty prominent role. I still remember how surprised I was when Charles offered me a position at the firm. I didn't hesitate, accepted the job on a Friday and was already at my desk by Monday morning. That was close to 8 years ago. Back then, I had just wrapped up therapy and had thrown myself headfirst into rebuilding my life, taking night classes to earn my MBA and focusing all my energy on building a future I could be proud of. Then Emily entered the picture. From the moment I met her, I was drawn in. She had this quiet confidence about her that I found magnetic. After checking with HR to make sure dating a coworker wouldn't cause any problems, I asked her out. We dated for a few months, fell hard for each other, and eventually tied the knot. I remember how touched I was when Charles paid for our honeymoon to Hawaii. He said it was his wedding gift to us, a sign of how much he appreciated my loyalty and work. At that point, I really believed I was living the dream. 3 years down the line, our office manager, a good man everyone respected, had been hinting at retirement. He'd bought a place up in rural Montana, planning to enjoy the peace and quiet of the countryside while he was still young enough to make the most of it. He was eyeing a move sometime in the next 6 months or so, completely determined to trade corporate life for the open air. And all this time I thought everything in my own life was just as stable. I couldn't blame Charles for stepping away when he did. He'd given his life to that company, and when he walked out of the office for the last time, he promised he'd stay in touch. And knowing him the way I did, I had no doubt he meant it. But even as he left, there were things I noticed in Nathan, things I never said out loud, not even to Emily. Nathan had a way of talking that could throw you off balance. Like the day he dropped into my office and started asking strange questions about Emily, questions that made me uncomfortable from the start. "You live with her," he said, casually leaning against the edge of my desk. "You sleep next to her every night. So what's she really like? Is she high maintenance or easygoing? Does she keep things light and fun, or is she more serious? I need to know what kind of personality I'd be dealing with if I brought her into my team." His tone was too casual to be professional. There was something underneath his words that I didn't like. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "Look, Nathan," I said, keeping my voice steady, "first of all, Emily and I are happily married. She's not just my wife, she's also one of the most pleasant people to be around. Second, she's committed to me, and third, she's a professional. If you think she's right for the job, then offer it to her based on her skills, not based on whatever idea you've cooked up in your head." He didn't seem rattled by my response. "Relax," he said, brushing it off. "I've just heard some talk, that's all. You know how office rumors fly around. Do you trust her?" he asked, his eyes fixed on mine. I looked at him for a long second. "Of course I trust her," I replied without hesitation. "But you? I wouldn't trust you any farther than I could throw you." That same afternoon, Emily came home and mentioned that Nathan had stopped by her desk. He asked how things were going at home. I told her, feeling the unease creep in again. Honestly, I thought it was a pretty forward question. She raised her eyebrows. "What did you say?" "I told him you're a joy to come home to, and I meant it," I said, trying to reassure her. "I also made it clear that you and I are solid. Happy." But despite all the reassurances I gave, something had started to shift between us. Nathan had begun taking more business trips, and more often than not, Emily was asked to join him. It didn't matter if she and I had plans, the company schedule came first. And slowly but surely the distance between us grew. We stopped being intimate, almost completely. At first I chalked it up to fatigue. But then I started noticing other things. Subtle things. Her clothing choices began to change. Emily had always dressed sharp, classy and professional. Lately, though, she was leaning into styles that were a lot more revealing than I was used to seeing on her. And it wasn't just the clothes. Her behavior toward me changed too. The vibrant, bubbly woman I married, the one who used to light up any room she walked into, seemed a little more distracted, a little less present and honestly, a little colder. Mark had never been the kind of guy who liked mingling too closely with his higher-ups outside of work. He believed in keeping some distance. As the old saying goes, familiarity breeds contempt, and he didn't want to blur the lines between professional and personal life. He wasn't sure what kind of people would be at this party either. "Do you know any of the folks who'll be there?" he asked Emily, trying not to sound too wary. "I've met a few," she replied with a shrug. "Most of them are college friends of Nathan's. Maybe one or two are clients, but I don't know everyone who's on the guest list." Mark gave a slow nod. "All right. But only if you can get home at a normal hour this week, all right? You've been working late a lot lately. Think that's possible?" "I think so," she answered, though her tone wasn't exactly reassuring. "We've got a few deadlines coming up, but I'll try." Just then, Nathan himself appeared in the hallway near Mark's office and called out in his usual overly friendly tone, "Hey buddy. You weren't kidding, Emily really is a pleasure to have around. I just wanted to say thanks for not giving her a hard time about all the hours. She's phenomenal at what she does. Honestly, I'd be lost without her." Mark forced a polite smile, but inside, something twisted in his gut. "I'm glad to hear you're happy with her work," he said, keeping his voice even. "Although, just out of curiosity, do you call her Em, or Emily, when you talk to her directly?" Nathan chuckled. "I call her Em most of the time." "Why?" Mark shrugged. "No reason. Just wondered." That night, as they were getting ready to leave for the party, Emily held up a dress he hadn't seen before. "Nathan asked me to wear this tonight," she said casually, slipping it over her shoulders. Mark raised an eyebrow. "Sure," he said slowly, "but just be careful, someone might take it the wrong way." She laughed as she adjusted her earrings. "I don't think so. Everyone knows where the lines are." "They better," Mark said, wrapping his arms around her and pulling her in for a quick hug. He leaned in to kiss her, but she gently pushed him back. "Later. I don't want to mess up my makeup." They drove across town to Nathan's townhouse, a two-story place nestled in a more upscale neighborhood than they were used to visiting. As soon as they stepped inside, Mark caught the unmistakable scent of marijuana lingering in the air. He glanced at Emily, but she didn't seem fazed. "I'll grab us something to drink," Nathan said cheerfully before disappearing into the kitchen. He returned with 2 glasses of what looked like wine and handed one to each of them. Emily took a generous sip without hesitation, while Mark just held his glass and sipped sparingly. That inner voice, the one that had always helped him avoid trouble, was practically screaming. Something about this whole night felt off. Nathan invited everyone to settle into the living room, so Mark followed Emily into the softly lit space. As she made her way to the seating area, she slid into a love seat, leaving just enough space beside her for someone else to join. Mark hesitated for a split second, watching her from behind. His instincts were on high alert, and he made a quiet promise to himself. Whatever else happened tonight, he was staying sharp, sober, and aware. Mark was just about to sit beside Emily when Nathan slid in first, landing next to her with a confident ease that made Mark's stomach tighten. Nathan casually lit up a joint someone had passed his way and took a deep pull, exhaling with the kind of satisfaction that comes from being completely at ease in your own domain. "Want a hit?" someone offered, holding it out toward Mark. He shook his head. "Thanks but no. Never really cared for it," he said simply. Charles, an older gentleman from the firm who still dropped by every now and then, nodded and passed the joint back to Nathan. Without hesitation, Nathan took another drag and then looked over at Mark with a grin. "Ah, come on man. Loosen up a little," he said, clearly enjoying himself. Mark offered a half-smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "You go ahead. I'd rather keep my head clear tonight." Nathan laughed. "Your loss. Besides, it's a party. Worst case, you get a little too loose, crash on the couch. You've got the whole next week off anyway, right?" Then Nathan turned to Emily, holding up the joint with a playful smirk. "Shotgun?" Mark's heart sank a little as he watched his wife, his Emily, smile and nod without the slightest hesitation. "Sure," she said, leaning in without even glancing at him. That moment hit Mark like a gut punch. A storm of thoughts swirled through his mind, but one was louder than the rest. Something was going on between Emily and Nathan, and he couldn't ignore it any longer. Nathan had said once that Mark was one of the best analysts on the team, and he was. But not just because he was good with spreadsheets. Mark paid attention. Details mattered to him. He'd learned that early on from Charles himself, back when he was just starting out. "Listen, son," Charles had told him once, his voice firm but kind, "it's never just about the numbers. In business, the devil's always hiding in the details. You watch those, trust your gut, it'll never steer you wrong." Those words echoed in Mark's head as he looked around the room. He noticed more than he let on, the barely there smudge of white powder just under Emily's nose, the same telltale mark on the other three guys lounging around the room. It wasn't hard to figure out what they'd been doing. Trying to play it cool, Mark sat down slowly and lifted his glass for a cautious sip, but something stopped him. There, at the bottom of the drink, he spotted tiny, undissolved granules swirling like snowflakes. Some kind of powder. It hadn't mixed in properly. "What the?" he whispered, setting the glass down on the table a little too fast. He looked up and realized everyone in the room was watching him. Their faces didn't look surprised, they looked expectant. A creeping fog started to settle over his thoughts. He tried to speak, but the words came out slurred, barely making sense even to his own ears. "You okay?" he heard Emily ask, her voice suddenly distant, like it was coming from the end of a tunnel. The next thing he knew, he was lying down, or maybe being laid down, on a large bed in a room he didn't recognize. His mind was thick, heavy, like it was wrapped in cotton. He turned his head slightly and saw Emily sitting at the edge of the mattress. Two other men were knocked out cold. One sprawled across a couch beneath the window, the other slumped in an overstuffed recliner, his head tilted at an uncomfortable angle. And everything, every detail, felt deeply, terribly wrong. Moving as quietly as he could, Mark crept downstairs, his head still cloudy but his instincts sharp. He needed to know what they'd slipped into his drink. He stepped into Nathan's kitchen, opening cabinets one by one until he found what he was looking for, a plastic Tupperware container with a screw-on lid. He took his untouched glass from the table and carefully poured the contents into the container, watching the powdery residue swirl around the bottom before sealing it tight. With the evidence in hand, he headed back into the living room and reached for Emily's bag, gently pulling her keychain out without waking her. Once outside, he pulled out his phone and made a call. "Everything okay?" RK's voice came through, casual but curious. "What's going on?" "I'd rather not explain over the phone," Mark said, his voice low and urgent. "Got it?" RK said without hesitation. "I'll be there in about 20 minutes. "Thanks, man. I really appreciate it." "Hey, semper fi or die, right?" Mark let out a small, tired chuckle. RK said that a lot. It was his way of saying, "I've got your back." "Or die," Mark echoed. After hanging up, he stared at a nearby convenience store for a few seconds. "Screw it," he muttered to himself. He walked in and bought a 12-pack of beer and 2 packs of cigarettes. He hadn't smoked since his days in the service, but right now? He just needed something, anything, to keep his hands and mind busy until RK arrived. When RK pulled up, Mark handed him the container. "You got this out of his house?" RK asked, holding it up carefully. "Yeah. From the kitchen. Poured it straight from my glass," Mark said. RK nodded. "You know, you probably won't be able to use any footage from inside Nathan's place. Not legally anyway." "I figured as much," Mark replied. "This isn't about building a case. It's personal now." "I get that," RK said quietly. Mark then handed him a spare key. "Here's one for my place," he said, and scribbled a 4-digit number onto a small scrap of paper. "This is the code for my security system." RK gave a nod. "Got it?" Later, back at Mark's house, the two of them huddled over RK's laptop as he pulled up the footage from the mini-camera Mark had managed to place, discreetly before things went south. The video had caught more than Mark expected. They saw when the drug began to kick in, the way the camera tilted upward as Mark laid back, his body giving out while the others looked down at him. The audio picked up too. They heard Emily's voice, soft and slightly worried, "Are you okay?" Then Nathan's voice, low and confident, "He's fine. Just let him take a little nap." Next came the moment that stopped Mark cold. They watched Emily lean down over him, her lips close to his ear. Mark remembered the gesture but not the words, not until now. And then, on the recording, they heard it. "You sure you don't want to tie him up and make him watch?" she whispered. Mark stared at the screen in silence, feeling his chest cave in. A memory, sharp, bitter, and clear, surfaced. And it was followed by something else. A different voice, quieter but colder. "Well, guess what, Dad? I run the show now," Nathan said, pacing in front of the others like he was delivering some twisted victory speech. Mark used to be the golden boy around here, but now? I've got his position. I've got his woman. And by next week, that clean-cut company man is gonna be just another coke-snorting burnout. Laughter erupted in the room. You boys with me on this? He asked, his voice full of cocky assurance. A chorus of "Yeah, we're in," followed from the three men lounging nearby. Then Nathan turned to Emily. What about you, Em? You on board with this? Because if you're not, say so now, and I'll make sure you're out on the street right alongside him. Without missing a beat, she smiled sweetly and said, I'm with you, babe. Honestly, I've come to love this life too much to walk away now. Mark's chest clenched. It wasn't just betrayal, it was willing, enthusiastic destruction. And the way she said it? Like she'd already forgotten the years they'd built together. They all laughed again and Nathan just grinned. That's what I like to hear. Do or die, baby. Mark couldn't stay in the room a moment longer. Wow, he muttered to himself, stunned, before stepping out onto the back porch with a beer in hand, trying to cool the rage boiling inside him. Inside, RK worked with silent efficiency, wiring the living room and bedrooms with both audio and video surveillance. He even tapped into the landline, setting the entire system to back up to a secure cloud server that could be accessed remotely from anywhere. When he was done, he handed Mark a slip of paper with the login credentials and the web address. He also pointed to a small hidden switch near the hallway. That'll let you turn the system on or off without drawing attention, he explained. Mark stared at it for a long moment. A part of him wanted to just torch everything, burn it all to the ground right then and there. But something inside told him to wait. No, he wanted her to see it. To watch their marriage collapse in real time, knowing it was her choices that set it ablaze. A new idea took shape. He walked back inside, grabbed another beer and sat down at his laptop. With steady hands, he forwarded the damning video to his own email account and opened it to verify it played correctly. Then he began drafting a detailed, carefully worded message. The email was addressed to every board member at Whitman & Company, and to David, the interim CEO. Mark laid out what had been going on behind the scenes. The drugs, the inappropriate relationship between Nathan and Emily, and the manipulation that had seeped into the workplace culture. He didn't sugarcoat a thing, just the facts, backed with irrefutable video evidence. But he wasn't done yet. He reached for Emily's phone, the same one he'd helped her set up months ago. He knew the passcode by heart. It was his birthday. Inside, her messages were like a gut punch he wasn't prepared for. There were dozens of conversations between her and Nathan. Flirty, graphic, cruel. And worse, in the last few months she'd started mocking him directly to Nathan, calling him boring, predictable, clueless. From what Mark could piece together, they'd been sleeping together for at least 6 months. But in the last 3, Emily had stopped hiding her contempt. And suddenly, everything about their recent life, the distance, the late nights, the changes in her, all of it snapped into focus with painful clarity. Mark already felt gutted by what he'd seen and heard, but what he found next took that feeling to a whole new level. It wasn't just the affair. That alone would have been humiliating and cruel. But the fact that she'd been flaunting it, documenting it with photos, that felt like a dagger. Buried deep in her phone was a gallery full of images, private, explicit shots of Nathan, including several taken in what was clearly his bathroom. Some were selfies, some taken by Emily herself. There was no mistaking the setting or the man. She kept them like souvenirs, like trophies of her betrayal. Meanwhile, back at Nathan's townhouse, morning light was filtering through the curtains. Nathan, fresh out of the shower, wrapped himself in a robe and strolled back into the bedroom. You want to head downstairs and get breakfast going? He asked Emily, casually scratching his chin. Mark'll probably want coffee, assuming he's waking up. Emily pulled on her robe and gave a nonchalant nod. Yeah, sure. Barefoot, she padded downstairs and started a pot of coffee before heading into the living room to check on her husband. But the couch was empty. The throw blanket she'd laid over him was crumpled on the floor, and his shoes, the ones he'd taken off before lying down, were gone. She froze. Panic surged through her chest as she realized the front door was unlocked. She hadn't heard him leave. He hadn't said anything. He had just vanished. Mark? She called out softly, unsure what she expected in response. She grabbed her phone and dialed his number. When he picked up, his voice was icy cold. What do you want? Mark, you weren't here when I woke up. I got scared. I didn't know where you'd gone. Are you okay? His bitter laughter crackled through the line. Why would you care? He spat. Sweetheart. She winced at the venom in his voice. I need you to come pick me up from Nathan's place, she said, trying to keep her tone steady. Please. Mark let out another harsh laugh, angrier this time. Oh, screw you. Yesterday I might have been clueless. But not anymore. And let me make one thing clear, you don't get to call me sweetheart or honey or anything else ever again. Mark, please, she whispered, her voice cracking. Don't be angry with me. Just save it, he snapped. Spare me the pathetic excuses. If you've got something to say, come say it in person. Alone. Do it now while I'm still willing to hear it. She paused, unsure of what to say. I mean it, Emily. Come alone, or don't come at all, he said before ending the call. She slowly lowered the phone, her face pale. Nathan had just stepped into the kitchen, running a hand through his damp hair. Well, he asked. Is he on his way? No, she said quietly. He's not coming. He wants me to go to him, and he said if anyone else shows up, he'll shoot them. Nathan blinked, then frowned. Seriously? She nodded. I've never heard him like that before. You didn't hear his voice. He's done. Nathan stepped back, letting out a low whistle. Modern tech, man, he muttered. It'll get you every time. You'd be amazed what we can pick up with a parabolic mic these days, RK said with a grim smirk as he scanned the live feed from his tablet. Anyway, listen, your wife just ordered an Uber. Nathan and the others are getting ready to follow right behind her in a separate car. Mark's stomach turned. What are they planning? Something ugly, RK replied. She's got something in her purse, whatever it is, they're planning to drug you with it. Knock you out, then haul you off somewhere. From what we gathered, she's supposed to get close to you, wait for the right moment and hit you with it. My guys will be tailing Nathan and his crew as soon as they pull out. Damn, Mark muttered, the weight of it all crashing down. Yeah, RK said quietly. Just keep your guard up. I'll text you updates. Mark thanked him and hung up, feeling the fire in his chest grow hotter by the second. Later, as Emily sat across from him in silence, the mask had finally cracked. She looked drained, empty, like she was just beginning to realize the full gravity of what she'd done. Mark stared at her coldly. Let me tell you something. When I get drunk, I don't get emotional or sloppy. I get mean. Real mean. Last time I let myself get that far gone, I nearly killed a man with my bare hands. Big guy too, way bigger than me. That was the day I swore off ever letting it happen again. He leaned forward, voice low and steady. You made a different kind of choice. You chose to become Nathan's little pawn. Emily covered her mouth, her voice trembling. Oh my God. Mark. What have I done? You tell me, he snapped. What did happen to you? You used to be one of the kindest, most grounded people I ever knew. Did you overdose on stupid? Or did Nathan hit you with some alien ray that scrambled your brain? Because all of this, it's sick. She sat there, tears brimming, unable to speak. He pointed to her purse. What's in there? Some kind of injection? A sedative? Let me guess, you're supposed to jab me with it, wait for me to pass out, then call Nathan so he can swoop in and rescue me? Ashamed, she gave the slightest nod. Pretty much. Mark nodded, expression hard. All right then. Here's what we're going to do. He took her phone and held it out. You're going to call him. Put it on speaker. I want to hear everything. Later, when Nathan showed up, smug and unaware, Mark was ready. The moment the door opened, Mark pounced, grabbing Nathan by the hair and slamming him against the wall. In one swift motion, he drew a knife and pressed the blade against his throat. Say your prayers, Nathan, Mark growled through gritted teeth. Because I'm about 2 seconds away from ending this. Nathan froze, the smell of fear thick around him. His body trembled, and then it happened. He lost control. Wetness spread across his pants as he whimpered in terror. Emily stumbled backward, her eyes wide with horror. Her voice cracked as she whispered, Who is this? What have I done? Mark didn't flinch. He applied more pressure to the blade, drawing a thin red line across Nathan's neck. Go ahead, he said, voice shaking with rage. Make peace with your maker. Just as Mark steadied his grip on the knife, ready to press it deeper, a familiar voice rang out from the doorway. Sergeant. RK's voice boomed with commanding authority. Mark. Drop the knife. Cops are en route, don't do this. Everyone in the room froze. Mark didn't move at first. His chest rose and fell in heavy bursts as he kept his blade against Nathan's skin. This man deserves worse than death, Mark muttered, the fury still burning behind his eyes. But RK's voice cut through the rage again, firmer this time. Not like this, brother. Don't throw your life away for a guy like him. Mark looked down at Nathan. The smugness, the arrogance, all of it had vanished. In its place was raw fear. The man who once strutted around like he owned everything now looked like a scared child. Apparently, all it took was facing his own mortality. Then Nathan did something unexpected. "You know," he said shakily, "my dad always loved you more than he loved me." Mark blinked, the words landing heavy. "That's not true, Nathan," he said quietly. "He always wanted to believe you'd grow into the kind of man who could follow in his footsteps. He hoped you'd rise to the occasion." Nathan swallowed hard. "Would you really have done it? Cut my throat?" Mark let the question hang in the air for a second, then slowly pulled the knife back. "I guess we'll never know," he replied. "But where you're headed, you'll be surrounded by people who won't hesitate the way I did. And I promise, they won't be as forgiving." He stepped away and Nathan collapsed onto the floor in a heap, gasping. Later, once things calmed down and Nathan was in police custody, Mark sat on the back porch with RK, 2 cold beers between them. RK pulled 2 cards from his pocket. "This one," he said, handing over the first, "is for a therapist. A good one. No nonsense, ex-military. You'll like him." Mark nodded. "The other?" RK continued. "That's for a divorce attorney. Michelle Hawkins. She's brutal, hates cheaters with a passion. I called her this morning. She's expecting you Monday morning, 8 a.m. sharp." Mark exhaled, the weight of everything settling over him. "Thanks, man, for all of it." "Semper Fi, brother," RK said, giving him a half-smile. Mark smiled faintly. "Bora," he said, their old word for sticking together no matter what. As they finished off their beers, RK stood and glanced around. "Well, looks like you've got a bit of a mess to clean up. But at least now you know where everything stands." A few days later, Mark was called into the office by David, the interim CEO. "The board's been watching how you've handled all this," David told him, "and I'll be honest, they're impressed. You've been a steady hand through some serious chaos. There'll be a promotion and a bump in pay, along with a few other perks." Mark nodded, keeping his gratitude measured. "Thank you." "Don't thank me just yet," David said. "First thing on your plate? You're going to lead the external audit. We're bringing in a third-party firm to comb through every file, transaction, and account Nathan touched since he joined the company." He gave Mark a firm look. "They report directly to you." Mark straightened in his seat. "Understood." It wasn't over yet, not by a long shot. But for the first time in a long time, Mark felt like he was finally standing on solid ground. By that point, Mark knew without a shred of doubt, Emily was going to prison. It was only a matter of time. The following morning he arrived at Michelle Hawkins' law office right at 8 a.m. sharp. As soon as he stepped inside, her assistant brought him in without delay. Michelle, sharp-eyed, focused, and every bit the legal force he'd been promised, sat across from him, going over the pile of documents, photos and videos he'd brought. She listened as Mark explained everything, the affair, the drugs, the attempted kidnapping. With every new piece of evidence, she made notes and asked precise, thoughtful questions. When they were done reviewing it all, she leaned back and explained the basics of California's divorce laws. "Everything is generally divided evenly," she told him, "but considering you had no children and the house was yours before the marriage, and given that you've been the primary contributor to the mortgage, odds are good the court will let you keep the house outright." Mark nodded, absorbing it all. "Don't worry," Michelle added with a reassuring glance. "We're going to come at this hard." As he left the office, his mind was a whirlwind. The job was stable again, the legal fight had begun, but part of him still felt bruised from what he'd gone through. Emily had tried to call again that evening, and this time Mark answered, if only to put the final nail in the coffin. Her voice was quiet. "Mark, I don't expect you to forgive me, but I just wanted to say I'm sorry." He gave a bitter laugh before replying. "Not just no, hell no. You didn't just cheat on me with that clown. You helped plan to have me drugged, assaulted. What kind of person does that?" She didn't answer. "And don't you dare ask if we can be friends," he added. "That ship sank a long time ago." "I understand," she said, her voice cracking. I hope it was worth it." He paused, then said softly, "Goodbye, Emily." He ended the call and watched through the window as she hung up too, tears streaking her cheeks. Later that evening, Mark packed a bag and hit the road. He didn't tell anyone right away where he was going, just drove until the lights of Las Vegas came into view. There, he met up with Gunny Johnson, an old Marine buddy who still had that same calming presence, the kind that made Mark feel grounded again. They caught up over drinks, and later that night, Gunny's niece Lauren dropped by. She'd been through her own mess of a breakup, and somehow in that shared space of healing and wreckage, something sparked between them. "If you want company tonight," she offered gently, "I wouldn't mind sticking around." Sounds like a plan, Mark replied with a faint smile. They shared a soft kiss before she headed upstairs. Mark stood for a moment in the quiet of the room, then made his way down to the kitchen. For the first time in a long time he felt like maybe, just maybe, things were finally turning a corner. After everything, Mark figured a little Vegas indulgence wouldn't hurt. He wandered into one of the smaller casinos off the strip, deciding to try his hand at a few games. Following Gunny's age-old advice, "Don't gamble what you're not ready to walk away with," he set a limit and stuck to it. By the time he cashed out, he was up by about $300. Not a fortune, but enough for a solid night. He spent it well: dinner, a few drinks, and a show with Candy. That night, she reminded him what it felt like to be truly wanted, body and soul. And just like the first night, she lit something inside him that he hadn't felt in years. The rest of the week rolled along in a blur of calm mornings, laughter, and shared evenings. By Friday, Mark felt like his balance had finally started to return. Back in California, the audit had uncovered what everyone feared, and more. First, there were the discrepancies in Nathan's expense reports. Several business trips, including those he'd taken with Emily, were riddled with forged receipts and inflated costs. Then the auditors discovered he'd been mishandling client accounts, something far more serious. The SEC was immediately notified. Within days, Nathan found himself under investigation for federal financial crimes. And it didn't stop there. A search warrant was executed on his townhouse, where authorities uncovered lewd photos and explicit videos involving other women, some of whom appeared unaware they were even being recorded. In the end, all 5 individuals involved, Nathan, Emily, and 3 others, were charged and convicted on multiple counts ranging from conspiracy to drugging, financial fraud, and invasion of privacy. When the verdict came down, the judge didn't hold back. He called their behavior appalling and made it clear he intended to set an example. He handed down the maximum sentence on nearly every count. As the convicted were led out of the courtroom in cuffs, Mark and David walked out past a wall of reporters, refusing to say a word. 10 days later, the sentencing was finalized. Justice, as far as the system could provide, had been served. About a week after that, Mark was at a company event when a woman approached him. Elegant, composed, yet there was something familiar in her eyes. "You're Mark," she said, extending her hand. "I'm Kristen. Alan was my uncle." Mark blinked, surprised. "I thought I'd met all of Alan's family." "I've been busy," she replied. "I was living in France when he passed and couldn't make it back for the funeral. I just wanted to meet the man who finally brought my worthless cousin to justice." "So there's no love lost between you two?" She gave a slight shake of her head. "None. I'm just glad someone finally held him accountable." They sat down and talked for a long while. Mark told her about everything: his downfall, the betrayal, the fight to regain control. Kristen listened closely, and while she was shocked by the details, she wasn't surprised. "You didn't deserve any of that," she said quietly. "And for what it's worth, I'm really glad we met." Over the following months, their friendship turned into something more. They dated, traveled, laughed, and healed together. For Mark, it was the first time in years that love didn't feel like a gamble. And then one night, in the quiet of her apartment, Mark took a knee. Kristen let out a squeal of joy and practically tackled him to the floor, smothering him in kisses. "I take it that's a yes?" Mark asked with a grin once he could finally breathe again. She pulled back just enough to look him in the eyes. "No," she said with a smirk. "That's a hell yes, Marine. Now carry me to bed and love me like you mean it." And just like that, the man who had once lost everything found his way back to something worth keeping.